Thank you very much for a wonderful warm welcome, and welcome to you all. Can you hear me through this? Cool. I might also just get the lights turned down a little bit because some of the images might be better under a slightly lower lighting scheme. Awesome, that's fantastic. You can still see me, right? Cool. So yeah, thank you so much for coming to this, and yeah, thank you so much to Fulbright New Zealand for hosting this talk. It's wonderful to be able to bring back the experience that we had presenting the New Zealand New Performance Festival in New York and Sleep Wake. And so I'll sort of talk you through what we brought over and our experience bringing it over and how the works changed and how we changed through taking the work there and how we're also now looking forward to taking another festival there in 2018. And really what emerged through this experience was a real experiment in taking our culture and art somewhere else from New Zealand and developing a relationship with artists in the United States and investigating what this concept of being Antipodean is, being on the other side of something like a globe, and what that means to our art. So yeah, I'll just start by introducing you to the concepts for the festival that we took over, which was a festival of performance work at La Mama Theatre in New York. And I'll talk a bit more about that theatre too. I'll talk about it now. It's a theatre with about a 50 or 60-year-old history of performance making. It's launched the careers of people like Julie Taymor, who did The Lion King, and also has launched many Hollywood actors' careers. A lot of the sort of Scorsese actors like De Niro, Pacino, Danny DeVito, all went through this theatre, and the first production of the musical Hair was done there. It's a great theatre and is a real living piece of New York's theatre history. So we went there with this kind of idea of bringing the Antipodean, as I mentioned, and really bringing something from the other side of the world, this mythological space that recently has kind of dominated a lot of the sort of filmmaking, of sort of Hollywood filmmaking through films like Avatar and Lord of the Rings, and sort of bringing a different story from that landscape that reveals something else about it. And so that was kind of one of the narratives which we kind of created for the festival, and one of the narratives that attracted the director of this theatre to the idea. So this is one of the images that we sort of produced and sort of promoting it, this idea of these two landscapes meeting in some way. And we ended up calling it the New Zealand New Performance Festival in New York. So audiences for this program of works found that we have a lot in common with American audiences. A lot of the works that ended up sort of being programmed really looked at that relationship. And I'll talk you through each one of those works and how we kind of assembled them as well. But they all shared common experiences, stories and perspectives between these two cultures. And yet our view from New Zealand is from the other side of the world, this idea of the Antipodean, a group of nations found the exact opposite of the world from all the global and cultural centres. So these countries, the Antipodean countries, sort of occupy an alternate time zone where our seasons are back to front, and we're quite literally found living beneath the feet of people in Paris, London, New York, all the other way around. And so in this upside down underworld, we work while the people of New York sleep, and we sleep while they work. And recent successes in New Zealand filmmaking kind of specialise in this kind of this making of wonder and spectacle, creating innovative special effects and building fantastical worlds like Narnia, Middle-earth and Pandora. They're all dreamscapes, I think, in different ways, and certainly dreamscapes for the sort of global culture or the cinematic culture, places we escape to sort of have stories told to us. And so this festival of works at La Mama came from this dream factory in Wellington, 18 hours in the future, where our today is there tomorrow. And yeah, we may speak the same language, we may share cultural memories or watch the same TV programs and listen to the same music, but the perspective from here comes from a distance and comes from where things are similar but slightly different. And so that was our kind of framing kind of statement about the festival. I'll talk a bit more about the economics of putting the festival together and how that determined the works. But in the end, a lot of the works all shared this theme in a very interesting way, and it became a real kind of clear and very concise kind of dialogue with the artists of New York. So, I'll talk you through some of the work so we have a bit of a shared vocabulary on that. This is a work by an artist called Marcus Mcshane. I'm starting with this work because Marcus and I, the idea for the festival came mainly from the conversations that Marcus and I had. Marcus is the lighting designer for Sleep Wake, the work which is already mentioned, and at least one or two others of the shows that we took over as well. And so between him and I, because he's very interested in sustainability, we started talking about how we could actually create a festival by taking one work over, by bringing a whole lot of works together at the same time. But anyway, his work that he brought over was an installation piece that which we showed in the Performance Arcade in 2011, and it's called Nag. And it's a completely self-powered artist studio where, by cycling on these these contraptions, he powers everything in his studio, from the printers through to the laptops and the music and everything else. And this has been shown all around New Zealand at Splore Festival and different kind of events in Auckland and in Nelson and stuff. And so it's been a very successful work, and he took that to the gallery at La Mama Theatre. So we had sort of performance artworks like this, as well as large-scale theatre pieces. This is a piece by a company called Binge Culture, and their work was a sort of a self-help seminar for the future. Once again, this plays into the sort of lovely notion of us being 18 hours into the future as well, and this very simple format that it was very, on one hand, very sort of practical, but also very theatrical and whimsical about preparing people for the future. And so their work sort of moves between these kind of almost non-theatrical forms and theatrical forms. And this was their second work they also did, called The Breakup. And they did this a couple of times now in various locations. They basically sit in this kind of arrangement for about 6 hours, and they have these improvised conversations which are a long breakup. And they'll switch roles, so this is the person who's been broken up with, and these are the voices that all amount to one other person. And it's an amazing kind of journey through the conversations that go into these sort of agonizing situations where people are not getting on and want to try and sort of resolve a situation and or break up. And it just took everybody through that whole journey in a really, really compelling way, really funny, really sort of profound. Another installation work that happened on the streets around La Mama was this piece called Listening Posts by a company which we've also presented in the Performance Arcade. And this work replays extracts of information from the American Freedom of Information Act on these little boxes. So you can plug your headphones in and listen in on this, on conversations or material gleaned from and about the Freedom of Information Act. And so it's just playing with that notion of kind of surveillance and the sort of information age we live in, and allowing people on the streets to listen in on stuff and kind of start to consider that. And that's a work which has actually been shown 3 times now in New York, because it was just shown in the Art in Odd Places Festival in New York too. So yeah, they're doing really well. This is a work by a Wellington comedian, James Nukisi, called So-So Gangster. And this is a wonderful kind of return of sort of gang culture to New York from Wellington, but obviously a sort of gang culture that was modelled on American gang culture. And James sort of promotes this work by describing himself as that he used to be in a gang and he was the worst gangster in the gang and was really quite useless. And he talks about he's a very clever and kind of sort of witty and well-researched comedian. So his information is really sort of quite profound that he delivers, at the same time being incredibly funny, and he really brought a really fantastic kind of contribution to the program and to that sort of commentary that we brought back from New Zealand. Arthur Meek's work. This is a piece which was originally called On the Conditions and Possibilities of Helen Clark, Taking Me as Her Young Lover. And this is a theatrical lecture, pretty much like the one I'm giving now, in the sense that he just relied on a series of images and his own delivery to provide an argument for, one, why Hillary Clinton needs a young lover, two, why America needs Hillary Clinton to take a young lover, and why he should be that young lover. And it could, maybe delivered in the wrong way, it could be kind of slightly sarcastic or so, but he does it with such sort of wide-eyed and disarming kind of humor that it really becomes an homage to Hillary Clinton, and also a very kind of a warm and fun kind of dialogue between a New Zealand sort of young New Zealand bachelor and the sort of American public that's come to see the show. And it was incredibly successful. It opened our festival and really got a lot of attention. And here he is at La Mama doing his speech. And so you can see he's built these very kind of funny PowerPoints behind him that almost make him some kind of weird fanboy or kind of sort of political groupie. And so this work had a return performance at La Mama about a week or two after, and was featured in quite a few magazines as well over there, and really got him a lot of attention. I think he's hoping to bring it back during the sort of run up to the next general elections. Yeah, so that was another work that sort of deals with that dialogue, bringing a sort of a New Zealand voice and a New Zealand sort of account to America and its own kind of concerns. And it was researched right to the last minute. He was looking at stuff from the news that was happening and bringing that into his conversations. So it was really clever. This is a work which is another solo by David Goldthorpe about Chet Baker, another famous American figure, but from history, and retelling this story from a New Zealand perspective, or at least, writing it from his point of view. And it was a wonderful piece because half of it is about Chet Baker and half is just playing his music. And David's, this is probably the most toured of the works that we had in the program. It's been shown around Australia and the UK and around New Zealand, and it had some really successful houses. This was a work called All Your Wants and Needs Fulfilled Forever by the Playground Collective, which opens in Auckland next week. I designed the set for this, and it's a piece about a single protagonist in this world of sort of film narratives and computer games. He's sort of a gamer, a film nerd, and it's kind of about him kind of almost as a subject of some kind of experiment or filmmaking plan that he's not kind of aware of. And so these characters are always on the outside trying to stage manage his life and sort of create the scenes and the experiences. And so it's a wonderful play between the sort of cinematic world, which comes from sort of Hollywood and Silicon Valley and comes from America a lot, and how we experience and consume that in New Zealand. And it's a wonderful, really well-written piece by Eli Kent, who's an award-winning New Zealand playwright. And actually, Eli performed in this piece in the central role in New York. And so the last piece I will talk about is Sleep Wake, which is my own work, which I directed and designed in collaboration with a sleep scientist, Philippa Gander, who went to Harvard University quite a while back and did her undergraduate studies on a Fulbright program. And I approached her in about 2007 to collaborate together on a theatre piece where performance and sleep science come together on stage. I'm very interested in sleep as the opposite of performance, because when we sleep, we cast off whatever kind of facades we construct during the day. And then we wake up, we start to reverse that, we start to put that back on. We spend a lot of time in front of the bathroom mirror. We spend a lot of time waking up and getting ready to be the person that we are at work or with our family or amongst other people. And so I was very interested in examining that with this sleep scientist. So it's a theatre piece, and Arthur Meek was one of the actors, the lead actor in it, the orator, and my partner who's here tonight was one of the dancers in it, at the back here, and various other artists involved in the festival. And it involved this sort of boxed set which we placed into the La Mama Theatre that had this wall which slowly kind of collapsed and let in a lot more kind of the space behind And it's a theatre piece at the beginning where Arthur, like he did in the Hillary Clinton work, delivers a lecture about sleep science. But he's wearing a kind of a dress which is cropped just underneath his chest, and there's obviously some theatrical kind of devices in there which are letting you know that there's something at play symbolically, poetically. And as the performance continues, this little boxed set, which kind of is quite separate from the rest of the space, suddenly collapses, and we let in a lot of other kind of ideas into the performance of that stage. It ceases to become a theatrical lecture so much as an experience in sort of stage spectacle and imagery, and becomes a dreamscape. And a lot of that relates to the science that I was discussing with Philippa about the stages of sleeping and dreaming, about the relationships between science and art, between the rational and the irrational. And so the work is in many ways a sort of meditation on all those things. And that sort of collapse of this very sort of rational space into something more else is kind of a part of that. When I was making this work, originally I was very influenced by, because this was 2007, by Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And by these images of people from a first world nation waking up with water all around them in this very, in this almost third world condition of the flood, this environmental disaster which is affecting a lot of countries around the world because of global warming or environmental kind of change, is suddenly kind of a dilemma which we're facing in not just in third world places but in first world situations. And this happened in 2007 in Europe, and the floods there as well. So I was looking at those images and really interested in that as a sort of an awakening, a sudden, like we have when we wake up from a deep sleep, of suddenly seeing things in a different way. And so the whole set floods, and the performance becomes more and more beautiful, more and more kind of spectacular. And so I was really, in this, once again, addressing a kind of the American audience and our own relationship with the American audience in New Zealand about the sort of problems that we're dealing with today. But in a very poetic, gentle space of just suggestion through image rather than through words, of kind of the kind of material surprise of being splashed by water by these dancers, or being that close to it in the performance, and suddenly being kind of slightly challenged by that, or surprised by it, the tangibility of something that happens in a live performance space, as opposed to in media and stuff. So that was what was happening in Sleep Wake. But also there was a kind of a dialogue in that work which was very kind of obvious too, because as well as this wall falling down, I'll start with the wall falling down. When the wall falls down, suddenly we're not in a box anymore, and we're looking at a space around it, and the lights illuminate it. This is the Ellen Stewart Theatre at La Mama, an amazing piece of very old architecture in the Lower East Side that used to be a Bavarian beer hall. And so suddenly the performance isn't just about this little idea which we brought here, this little box. It's about a relationship between that box and the architecture. And so what I did is I worked very hard to kind of connect the experience in the performance with this architecture and with New York through that. So, I mean, what we did in the design is we opened these doors at the back here, which open to a dressing room, and there are mirrors in the back wall, and so the audience could see themselves reflected right at the back of the space. And these little shifts that we managed to engineer in the performance helped unite the two architectures at this point. So there wasn't an exclusive relationship. We weren't just broadcasting an idea from New Zealand. We were bringing something that dialogued with the space. And the lights came up on the whole architecture, and when the sound started to really get loud, all these little tin panels started to rattle like little scales. So there was a lot of different relationships that occurred, not just visually. And at the very last scene, we have a Skype scene where a Skype link is made with a performer here in Wellington, and there's a dialogue with the character on stage and her across these, across that hemisphere, right round to the Antipodes. And it's a kind of very banal dialogue, but she's just woken up and he's kind of in this theatre space, and she starts to describe her dreams, and it's a very much a kind of a play with that distance, and once again collapsing that boundary between here and there and between two countries. And that's us just sitting up in the space. So So you can see the set being built, and yeah, there was one scene with on the beds, which is right at the back of the theatre. So you're looking through the box at these performers right at the back. I want to talk a little bit now. How much time have I gone so far?
25 minutes.
Good, cool. I want to talk a little bit now about some other things that occurred in the festival. First of all, the whole setup of the festival, but also some of the cultural kind of events that we created in collaboration with Jack Gray. So the first thing is, yeah, the arrangement of this festival. So that's a lot of us just after it, so we're all happy, we've done it, we're relaxed finally, with a couple of people from La Mama. So that's Mia Yu, the director of La Mama Theatre, and that's Denise Grieber, who's one of the producing managers. And when we decided we were going to take this festival over, Marcus, who's here, and I had already had a lot of conversation about how we might be able to bring a number of works rather than just one work, a number of artists rather than just one artist, so that we weren't just kind of sharing one experience, we're trying to share a whole community. And I'll get on to why some of that was a little bit flawed a little bit later on, or what actually, how we tried to develop that. But what that meant was actually we had one shipping container, and we put all our sets into that one shipping container. We shared the costs to try and bring that to freight that container over, and we shared the publicity costs, and we all worked for free. None of us had any wage to go there. We paid our own way or some way. I was very lucky to get a Fulbright travel grant, and we all did what we could to actually arrive there and help each other make these productions. So we also worked on each other's productions too. So Marcus lit my show as well as having his own work. Debbie was a sleeper in Sleep Wake, as well as working on several other pieces. And we all managed to sort of create this very tight, compact unit for producing 8 works and sharing them with the New York audience. And this produced a different economy for touring and sharing theatre overseas. And working with Creative New Zealand on sort of trying to create similar initiatives, we get into very large figures, but this was very minimal because of that shared economy and the compact nature of it. And that we were all helping each other out in different ways, bringing different resources. I'd obviously made the connection with La Mama and actually established that opportunity. So that was one big thing I brought to the whole relationship. And other people brought different kind of funds in or areas of expertise such as marketing or lighting. And eventually we had a whole festival. It was also a sort of testing a different model for sustainability, so that we're not actually expending a lot of resource and bringing 8 works over. It's actually the same footprint environmentally as one work. And that was really important. And so all these things sort of tried to create a different kind of culture for touring work, because it's very hard to get New Zealand art, particularly large-scale visual theatre works, to the other side of the world. I've had so many sort of directors of theatres say, well, we can bring a company from much closer for the same price and has a very similar style or so. And so we were very lucky to have this opportunity for La Mama, but we also were able to sort of add to that through our collaborative practices. And one of the things that I was quite sad that we weren't able to share in this, and did work quite hard to do, was to share more work by Māori artists or works about Māori concerns in the program. I did invite Tawata Productions, but they're already busy on a collaboration with Turtle Island in Canada at the time, so they weren't able to take up the offer. And also sort of talked with various other companies, but they were also unable because of the sort of financial kind of investment that's involved. So in the end, a lot of these people, because they were their works kind of were close and intersected with each other, they were able to come over. And also, I mean, there were companies like Black Grace were touring the States at the same time as us. And just recently, Lemi Ponifaccio has just done a massive extravaganza at the Luminato Festival in Toronto. So it's not as if those works were underrepresented in North America, but I just feel like it would have been a much stronger sort of completion of our program in that regard. And it would have been, it's something that's missing from our narrative. But in the same sense, there was a very clear, concise narrative here, and having another opportunity in 2018, I hope we can really develop that aspect. And that's where I want to talk about something that actually came a little bit later on into the program, which I think was really significant. And that was where Jack Gray, who's a choreographer from Auckland, he contacted me about helping out the festival in some way, because he was also in town conducting some workshops on Indigenous performance at NYU with his partner C. Dakota Alejandro, who is from Guahan. So he's an Indigenous American artist. And so Jack Gray is one of the founding members of Atamira Dance Company. And actually, I think it's just in the next 2 or 3 weeks, he's got a new work, Miti Miti, which is being premiered by that company in Auckland. And so, anyway, so he came to me and was really keen to get involved in the festival and participate, because he'd been involved in Sleep Wake earlier on. And he was really keen on developing some representation and acknowledgement of Maori and Indigenous American peoples in the opening event. And with his help, this became a whole new performance in our program that the staff at the Mama are still talking about. So, yeah, in the end, I invited Jack to run the whole ceremony, the opening ceremony that we had. And that whole evening at La Mama, where the audience got to see about 3 different art performance works over the course of the evening, 2 by Binge Culture and Marcus Performance Nag and Sleep Wake, and James Nkisi's So Gangster. We then had this big celebration at the end of that whole process. And Jack wanted us to start, so we started with I lost my notes here, so I'm just going to go forwards. So there was a welcome from Dakota as an Indigenous American artist, and he started the whole evening. Jack responded, and then we followed the rest of the evening much in the form of a pōwhiri to really share that culture with La Mama and the artists and the people there. And we gifted taonga to the people of the theatre, and sang a waiata, and performed a haka. So I've got a video of the haka. There was... Oh, maybe I'll let us get through it. What I found really interesting in the lead up to this was there was a lot of resistance in the team to doing the haka at first, and Jack had to work really hard to convince everybody. And they only really agreed to do it when Jack spoke of the many American people that he's worked with in workshops and taught the haka to, and his kind of wedo to them was, well, if these American people can do the haka, why can't you as New Zealanders? Why can't you stand up and represent your country in a way which reflects your whole culture? And at that point, then everybody sort of very quickly kind of lost their very Pākehā sort of inhibitions about it, and felt comfortable about following his kind of offer. And in the end, I think that kind of was a really poignant part of our journey there, really. And in the lead up to doing this, there was a lot of the artists were sort of trying to clarify to themselves why they would do it, and Arthur wrote a very eloquent kind of description of what he was bringing to it, and so did James Nkisi, who's in the front here, and its significance to them as artists. And James said, while he realises that although we aren't Maori, except Jack, thank God, we've been gifted the opportunity to hakala mama, to challenge them and to look them in the eye and say, we are here and we are Aotearoa, and to really kind of make a very clear statement about our culture in New Zealand and make a decision about how we represent ourselves as a culture. And Arthur also spoken in similar terms about the 1905 original All Blacks and how a lot of them were doing day jobs and actually coming to the other side of the world to play a game and show the British, their British kind of colleagues how they play and who they are, and really share that in a very proud way. And so these kind of decisions amongst the whole group really solidified and cemented that, and really shared how we do things in New Zealand as another performance within the program, and show that our protocols here in New Zealand and our outlook is different, and that it is so intimately connected to our Maori people, even in a selection of works like this. And so now we're starting to talk about next year, and I'm talking with Jack about bringing a work, possibly Miti Miti, to the Mama, because and possibly working with him on my new work as well, which is called Ecology and Fifths, which is about the New Zealand landscape. We're just going tonight to see the White Guitar by the Conch, because they're very interested in joining us as well. Already a sort of a shape for this next program is sort of emerging through the, like in the last program, through the enthusiasm that is volunteered by people for the project, through the sort of economy of a sort of a creative relationship